Hey guys, tonight we're heading out on the cold, unforgiving waters of medieval Europe, where you'll discover exactly why a single day aboard a fishing boat would break you in ways you never imagined. Picture this. It's barely dawn. The sky is that sickly gray color that promises nothing good, and you're standing on a wooden platform that's maybe 30 feet long, creaking and groaning like it's already given up on life. The smell hits you first. Rotting fish guts, unwashed bodies, tar, and salt mixed into a cocktail that makes your stomach flip before you've even left the harbor. Welcome to your new reality as a medieval fisherman, where every single moment is a test of endurance, and spoiler alert, you're probably going to fail spectacularly. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. I love seeing this community spread across the globe, all of us winding down together. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You shuffle onto the boat and immediately your modern sneakers, because yes, we're imagining you've time traveled in your pajamas and whatever footwear you had nearby. Slip on the deck. The slick with something you really don't want to identify. Could be fish slime, could be seawater, could be the blood from yesterday's catch that nobody bothered to wash away because, frankly, why would they? It's just gonna get bloody again in about an hour. The medieval fisherman next to you, a guy named Alfric who's maybe 30 but looks 50 thanks to a lifetime of this nonsense, shoots you a look that's equal parts amusement and pity. He's seen landlubbers before. They never last. The boat itself is a revelation in how little humans needed to trust their lives to the sea. This isn't some romantic sailboat you've seen in movies. This is a clinker-built vessel, meaning its planks overlap like a horrifying wooden ribcage, and they're held together with iron nails that are already showing rust spots. The gaps between planks have been stuffed with tarred rope and animal hair. Yes, actual hair, to keep the water out. Spoiler, it doesn't keep all the water out. You notice there's already a puddle sloshing around your feet, and nobody seems concerned. That's because bailing water is just part of the job description, something you'll be doing approximately every 20 minutes for the rest of this endless day. The boat rocks even here in the harbor, tied to a wooden post that looks like it's been there since the Norman conquest. You grab the side, the gunnel if you want to be technical, and a splinter immediately drives itself under your fingernail. You yelp. Alfric doesn't even look over. He's busy coiling a rope that's rough as tree bark, the kind of rope that would give you rope burn just from looking at it wrong. This rope is made from hemp, twisted and tarred, and it's literally strong enough to hold the boat to the dock in a storm. It's also strong enough to take the skin clean off your palms, which you're about to discover firsthand. Let's talk about the crew for a moment, because these are going to be your companions in suffering. There are maybe 5 or 6 of you total, depending on the size of the boat and the ambition of the day's fishing plans. There's Alfric, who seems to be the one in charge, though medieval fishing boats didn't really have formal captains in the way you're imagining. Then there's his brother Wolfston, who has 3 teeth and communicates primarily in grunts. There's a teenage boy named Cuthbert who's maybe 14 and has been doing this since he was 8, which means he's already more competent than you'll ever be. And there are a couple of other weather-beaten men whose names you don't catch because everyone's moving with purpose and nobody has time to welcome the obvious newbie who's going to be dead weight all day. The sky is getting lighter now, shifting from gray to a pale, watery blue that promises the sun will eventually make an appearance. This is actually important because medieval fishermen didn't have watches or clocks. They told time by the sun, the tides, and a sort of instinctual feeling about when the fish would be biting. Most fishing boats left at dawn because that's when certain fish were most active near the surface. You'd be working with the rhythms of nature whether you liked it or not, and nature doesn't care about your sleep schedule or your need for coffee, which doesn't exist in medieval Europe anyway. So enjoy your breakfast of stale bread and weak ale. Speaking of breakfast, you're not getting one. Well, not a real one. Alfric tears off a chunk of dark rye bread that's so hard it could double as a weapon and tosses it to you. You catch it barely, and it weighs about as much as a brick. This is your meal. No butter, no jam, nothing to wash it down except a swig from a leather flask that contains ale so weak it's basically alcoholic water. But you drink it anyway because regular water is genuinely less safe, and you know what? The ale doesn't even taste good. It's sour and yeasty and warm, and it sits in your stomach like regret. But it's calories, and you're going to need every single one of them. Now the crew is untying the boat. Wolfston unhitches the rope from the dock post with practiced ease, coiling it quickly before tossing it into the boat where it lands with a heavy thud. The boat immediately starts drifting, and you feel a lurch of panic because you're not ready, you haven't mentally prepared, you haven't even fully woken up yet. But the medieval world doesn't wait for you to feel ready. Alfric and another crew member have already grabbed long wooden poles and are pushing off from the dock, using the shallow harbor bottom to propel the boat away from shore. The oars, massive, heavy things made from single pieces of wood, are being slotted into oarlocks, and suddenly everyone's rowing except you, because you're just standing there like a tourist. Row, you fool! Alfric barks at you, and you scramble for an oar. It's heavier than you expected, way heavier, and the handle is worn smooth by generations of hands. You slot it into place and try to match the rhythm of the others, but you're immediately out of sync. Your oar catches the water at the wrong angle and nearly gets yanked from your grip. Cuthbert, the teenager, actually laughs at you. A 14-year-old is laughing at you. This is your life now. The rowing is brutal. Each stroke requires you to pull with your entire body. Legs pushing, back straining, arms burning. And you have to do this over and over and over, matching the pace that Alfric sets with his effortless metronomic strokes. You're sweating within 5 minutes, your hands are already developing blisters within 10, and your lower back is screaming at you within 15. The harbor gives way to open water, and the waves get choppier. Each swell lifts the boat and then drops it, and your stomach does the same gymnastics routine. You're not seasick yet, but you can feel it lurking, waiting for the right moment to make you absolutely miserable. Historians still argue whether medieval fishermen had any formal training or if it was purely learned through apprenticeship and family tradition. But watching this crew work, you realize it's definitely the latter. Every movement is automatic, born from years of repetition. They read the water, the wind, the boat itself in ways you can't even begin to comprehend. When Alfric says to adjust your rowing because there's a current coming from the left, you have no idea how he knows that. But sure enough, you feel the boat start to drift and everyone compensates without even thinking about it. After what feels like hours, but is probably only 30 minutes, Alfric finally calls for the rowing to stop. You're miles from shore now. You glance back and the coast is a distant smudge, and you're in the fishing grounds. This particular spot doesn't look any different from any other spot in the endless expanse of gray-blue water. But apparently this is where the fish are. Medieval fishermen developed an intricate knowledge of the seabed, the currents, the places where fish congregated. They didn't have sonar or fish finders or GPS. They had memory, observation, and probably a little bit of luck. The nets come out now, and oh boy, are you not prepared for this. These aren't the lightweight nylon nets you might have seen in modern contexts. These are heavy hemp nets, weighted with stones and fitted with floats made from cork or inflated animal bladders. The mesh is coarse and rough, and just handling the net is another opportunity for your soft modern hands to get absolutely destroyed. Alfric demonstrates how to cast the net, letting it spread wide before it hits the water, and he makes it look effortless. When it's your turn, you manage to tangle yourself in it, nearly fall overboard, and cast it in a sad clump that definitely isn't going to catch anything. Wolfston grunts something that you're pretty sure translates to useless, and honestly, you can't argue. The boat rocks constantly, a motion that never stops and never gets comfortable. Your legs are struggling to find their sea legs, as the saying goes, and every time you try to stand still, a wave catches you off guard and you stumble. The crew moves around the deck with total confidence, their bodies automatically adjusting to every pitch and roll. You, meanwhile, are clutching the gunnel again, adding more splinters to your collection, trying not to think about how deep the water is beneath you or how far you are from land or how absolutely no one would be able to save you if you fell in. The smell hasn't gotten better. If anything, it's worse now that the sun is higher and starting to warm everything up. The fish guts baking on the deck boards release new and innovative odors. Your clothes, those pajamas you time-traveled in, are already soaked with a combination of seawater, sweat, and unidentifiable fish slime. You're cold and hot at the same time, which shouldn't be possible but somehow is. Your hands hurt, your back hurts, your legs hurt, and you've been on this boat for maybe 2 hours. You have the entire day ahead of you. Welcome to medieval fishing. You're going to hate every minute of it. The sun climbs higher, and with it comes a problem you hadn't even considered in your naive modern brain. You need to use the bathroom. Not in a this can wait kind of way, but in an urgent your body is making demands kind of way. You look around the deck of this tiny, crowded fishing boat, searching for anything that resembles a restroom, a latrine, a bucket with a curtain around it. Literally anything. There's nothing. Just wooden deck, coiled ropes, fishing nets, and 5 other men who are pointedly not making eye contact with you as the realization dawns on your face. Where's the you start to ask Alfric, but the words die in your throat because you already know the answer. His weathered face cracks into the first genuine smile you've seen from him, and it's not a kind smile. It's the smile of someone who remembers their first day on a boat and is enjoying watching you figure this out the hard way. The sea, friend, he says simply, gesturing to the vast expanse of water surrounding you. The sea provides, and the sea receives. Oh no, no. But your body doesn't care about your modern sensibilities or your embarrassment. Biology is biology, whether you're in the 21st century or the 13th. You're going to have to figure this out, and you're going to have to figure it out now. The process, as Cuthbert helpfully demonstrates when his own needs arise, involves making your way to the back of the boat, the stern, technically, and hanging your rear end over the side while gripping the gunwale for dear life. There's no privacy. There's no toilet paper that won't be invented for centuries. There are no wipes, no dignity, no mercy. Just you, the open ocean, and the very real possibility that a wave could hit at exactly the wrong moment and send you tumbling into the water with your pants around your ankles. Actually, medieval fishermen wore simple wool tunics and brays, basically linen underwear, so the logistics are slightly different but no less mortifying. You position yourself at the stern, acutely aware that everyone can see you but pretending they can't because the alternative is too humiliating to contemplate. The boat rocks and you nearly lose your balance immediately. You grab the side with both hands, your knuckles white, trying to squat in a position that feels both precarious and utterly exposing. The wind whips around you, which at least provides some ventilation, but also means you're literally hanging your bare backside out over the North Sea in November. It's cold. It's so cold that parts of you are trying to retreat inside your body for warmth. And then you face the cleanup problem. Medieval fishermen used a variety of solutions, none of them good. Some used handfuls of seawater, scooping it up and hoping for the best. Others used scraps of old rope, unraveled hemp fibers that were rough enough to practically count as medieval sandpaper. The wealthy might have used wool scraps or linen rags that got rinsed and reused, which is exactly as unpleasant as it sounds. Some historical accounts suggest that coastal communities used smooth stones or shells. You look around desperately and spot a frayed piece of rope. It'll have to do. The experience is everything you're imagining and worse. Much worse. Historians still argue whether medieval people were genuinely unbothered by these conditions or simply had no choice but to adapt. But watching Cuthbert whistle a little tune while conducting his business off the stern suggests that familiarity breeds, if not contentment, at least acceptance. You, however, are not familiar. You are traumatized. And you have to do this every single time nature calls, which on a boat surrounded by water and drinking weak ale all day is going to be frequently. But wait, it gets better, or rather worse. What about when you're actively fishing and can't spare the time to carefully position yourself at the stern? What about during a storm when hanging over the side would be actual suicide? The answer is both simple and horrifying. You just go. Right there on the deck. The crew has been walking through fish guts and seawater all morning anyway. What's a little more liquid to slosh around in the bilge? The boat already smells like death and the sea had a baby. Your contribution barely registers. And we haven't even discussed seasickness yet, which is a whole other category of humiliation. The constant rocking that never stops, the swells that lift you up and drop you down, the way your inner ear absolutely refuses to make peace with the motion. It all adds up. About 3 hours into your shift, you feel it coming. Your mouth starts watering in that specific way that means trouble. Your stomach clenches. You try to breathe deeply, to focus on the horizon like you vaguely remember reading somewhere, but it's too late. You rush to the side and vomit spectacularly into the sea, heaving up that brick of rye bread and weak ale you choked down at dawn. The crew doesn't even pause in their work. This is apparently so common it doesn't warrant a reaction. Wolfston might have grunted something that sounded sympathetic, but you're too busy being miserable to care. You retch again and again until there's nothing left but bile and the certain knowledge that you're going to die on this boat. First time always purges the landlubber out, Alfric says, not unkindly, as he passes by with a coil of net. You'll feel better after, or you won't, and you'll spend the day feeding the fish. Either way, work continues. He's right about one thing: work does continue. Medieval fishing boats didn't have the luxury of sick days or breaks for the squeamish. If you couldn't pull your weight, you didn't eat from the catch. And on some boats, you might not even make it back to shore with your share of the earnings. The economics were brutal and simple. This is a business, and every man aboard needs to contribute or he's just dead weight. Literally, in some cases, as crew members who couldn't work might find themselves conveniently left behind at the next port. The vomiting subsides eventually, but you feel hollowed out and shaky. Your mouth tastes like copper and regret. And you still need to work because the nets need hauling and the fish need sorting, and nobody cares about your delicate constitution. Welcome to manual labor in an era before worker protections or sympathy for weakness. Let's talk about personal hygiene, since we're already deep in the uncomfortable territory. You don't get to wash your hands. There's no soap on this boat. Soap exists in medieval Europe, but it's expensive and certainly not wasted on fishermen. You rinse your hands in seawater occasionally, which does basically nothing except make them salty and even more prone to cracking. Every cut, every blister, every tiny wound on your hands is getting exposed to salt water multiple times per hour. It burns. It stings. It never heals properly because you never stop working. Your fingernails are black with grime by mid-morning. There's fish scales embedded under them, tar from the ropes, blood from your own blisters, and probably some residual evidence of your earlier bathroom adventure. In the modern world, you'd be rushing to wash your hands, maybe using sanitizer, definitely not putting these hands anywhere near your face or food. Here, you eat your midday ration of dried fish. Yes, fish, because what else would fishermen eat with these same filthy hands? You try not to think about it. Thinking about it makes it worse. The dried fish, by the way, is so salty it makes your eyes water. It's been preserved in a way that ensures it won't spoil on long voyages, which means it's basically a fish-shaped salt lick. You gnaw on it like a dog with a bone, trying to rehydrate with more of that weak ale, which just makes you need to use the facilities again, which means another humiliating trip to the stern. It's a cycle of indignity. Sweat is pouring off you now despite the cold wind. Physical labor generates heat, and you're wearing wool because that's what medieval fishermen wore, which doesn't breathe like your modern synthetic fabrics. The wool gets wet from sweat and seawater, and it stays wet and it's heavy and it chafes. Your inner thighs are developing a rash. Your armpits are raw, and there's absolutely nothing you can do about it except endure. Around midday, Wolfston produces a small knife and starts picking at his teeth with it, removing chunks of breakfast that have been wedged there since dawn. Then he uses the same knife to gut a fish. Nobody blinks. This is normal. Medieval concepts of hygiene were, shall we say, different from ours. People didn't understand germ theory. That wouldn't come for another several centuries. They washed when convenient, which on a fishing boat was basically never, and they lived in a state of dirtiness that would horrify modern health inspectors. Your modern immune system, pampered and protected by antibiotics and hand sanitizer and pasteurization, is absolutely having a meltdown. Every surface you touch is contaminated with something. The water you're drinking has probably got parasites. The food is questionable at best. And your body, used to climate-controlled environments and regular showers and dental hygiene, is staging a full rebellion. Your stomach cramps. Your head aches. Your skin itches everywhere. But here's a quirky historical tidbit that might distract you from your misery. Medieval fishermen sometimes believed that urinating on rope made it stronger and more resistant to rot. The ammonia in urine supposedly helped preserve the hemp fibers. Whether this was actually effective or just a convenient excuse to pee on the equipment is lost to history, but you watch in horror as one of the crew members does exactly this, casually watering a coil of rope before going back to work. Alfric notices your expression and shrugs. Keeps it supple, he offers by way of explanation. The social dynamics of bodily functions on a small boat are fascinating in an anthropological, deeply uncomfortable way. There's an enforced casualness about it all. Everyone pretends not to notice when someone is handling their business. I stay focused on work. Conversations continue. It's a collective agreement to preserve whatever shreds of dignity remain, even though you're all literally living in each other's filth in a space smaller than a modern studio apartment. You shift your position, trying to find a spot on the deck that isn't wet or slimy, and immediately regret it as your hand lands in something that's definitely not water. You don't look at it. Looking would make it real. You just wipe your hand on your tunic, which is already disgusting anyway, and try to focus on literally anything else. The horizon, the clouds, the way Alfric's beard has bits of fish scales tangled in it like the world's worst glitter. Medieval fishing boats didn't carry much fresh water. What they had was for drinking, not washing, and it was rationed carefully. By the end of a long day, everyone's lips would be cracked from the salt air, their throats parched, and that small barrel of increasingly stale water would look like the most precious substance on earth. You take a sip when Alfric allows it, and it tastes like wood and algae and disappointment, but it's wet and that's all that matters. The digestive realities continue throughout the day. That dried fish and dark bread aren't sitting well. Medieval diets were heavy on salt, grain, and whatever protein was available, with very little fresh vegetables or fruit, especially out at sea. Constipation was common. When it wasn't constipation, it was the opposite, usually at the most inconvenient times. You watch the crew handle these biological inevitabilities with the same stoic determination they bring to hauling nets, and you realize that this is just life. This is what humans endured for thousands of years before plumbing and privacy became standard. Your modern sensibilities are completely shattered by hour 6. You've accepted that you're going to be dirty, smelly, and uncomfortable until you reach shore, and maybe even after that, because medieval towns weren't exactly pristine either. You've made peace with the fact that everyone on this boat has seen everyone else in various states of undress and biological function. You're all just animals trying to survive, dignity be damned. Your hands are the first casualties of the medieval fishing life, and they're going to haunt you for the rest of this miserable day. By mid-morning, the blisters from rowing have burst, leaving raw, weeping patches of skin that scream every time you touch anything. And unfortunately for you, fishing involves touching everything constantly. The ropes, the nets, the oars, the fish themselves. Every single surface on this boat seems specifically designed to cause maximum pain to your soft, uncalloused, modern hands. Alfred calls for the nets to be hauled in, and your stomach sinks faster than an anchor. You've watched the crew cast these nets, seen them sink into the murky water with their stone weights pulling them down, but you haven't yet experienced the special torture of pulling them back up. That's about to change. The net rope is thick as your wrist, soaked with seawater, and heavy beyond belief even before you factor in whatever fish have gotten tangled in the mesh below. Grab hold, Alfred commands, and you wrap your destroyed hands around the rope. The coarse hemp fibers immediately find every raw spot, every blister, every tiny cut. It's like gripping a rope made of needles. You pull and nothing happens. The net doesn't budge. You pull harder, throwing your pathetic modern body weight into it, and the rope slips through your hands, tearing away another layer of skin. You can actually feel the flesh peeling. There's blood now, mixing with the seawater, making everything even more slippery. Wolfston positions himself behind you and starts hauling with the easy rhythm of someone who's done this 10,000 times. The net begins to rise, inch by agonizing inch. You're supposed to be helping, but honestly you're just clutching the rope and trying not to cry. Medieval rope making was an art form. Hemp fibers were twisted together into strands, and those strands were twisted into larger ropes, creating something incredibly strong but also incredibly rough. The twisting process left the surface irregular, with stiff fibers sticking out at angles, each one ready to stab into your palms. The technique is everything, and you have none of it. You're supposed to use your whole body, legs bracing, back doing the work, arms just guiding. Instead, you're all arms, yanking desperately, achieving nothing except more injury. Cuthbert, that 14-year-old prodigy of suffering, actually pauses to show you the proper form. He's maybe 90 pounds soaking wet, but he's hauling net with mechanical efficiency while you, a full-grown adult from an era of gym memberships and protein shakes, are failing spectacularly. Let the ropes slide through, then grip and pull, he explains, demonstrating. Don't fight it. Work with the waves. His hands, you notice, are like leather, calluses upon calluses, built up over years of this abuse until the nerves probably don't even register pain anymore. Your hands will never get there. You'd need months, maybe years of daily torture to develop that kind of protection. The net breaks the surface finally, and it's writhing. Dozens of fish are tangled in the mesh, thrashing and flipping, their silver scales catching the weak sunlight. There are cod, herring, some flatfish you don't recognize, and a few things that look genuinely prehistoric. The crew heaves the net onto the deck with a massive wet slap, and suddenly you're ankle-deep in struggling fish, seawater, and seaweed. The fish are everywhere, sliding across the deck, flopping against your legs, and your job now is to untangle them from the net without destroying the net itself. This is where the real hand torture begins. The net mesh is narrow, and the fish have wedged themselves in at impossible angles. You have to work your fingers into the wet hemp, feeling for where the fish is caught, then carefully extract it without tearing the net. The hemp scrapes your knuckles raw. The fish scales slice tiny paper-cut-style wounds into your fingertips. Some fish have spines that stick you. Others bite. Yes, fish bite. And you discover this when a decent-sized cod clamps down on your thumb and refuses to let go. You yelp and shake your hand frantically until it finally releases, leaving a perfect semicircle of tooth marks that immediately starts bleeding. Careful with the dogfish, Alfric warns, but too late. You've already grabbed what you thought was a regular fish and discovered it has a spine on its dorsal fin that's just stabbed into your palm. The pain is immediate and surprising, like a bee sting underwater. You drop the fish and it flops away, and Alfric just shakes his head. "That'll swell," he says matter-of-factly. "Try not to grab anything for a bit. Try not to grab anything. On a boat where your entire job is grabbing things." Excellent advice. The work continues relentlessly. Every fish needs to be removed from the net, sorted by type and size, and tossed into different sections of the boat. The valuable cod go in one pile. The herring, which are more common and less profitable, go in another. The trash fish, things nobody wants to buy, get tossed back into the sea if they're still alive, or kept for the crew's own dinner if they're not. Your hands are doing this work on autopilot now, pain receptors so overwhelmed they've started to go numb, which is actually more dangerous because now you can't tell when you're injuring yourself further. Historians still argue whether medieval fishermen used any kind of hand protection. Some evidence suggests they might have wrapped their hands in cloth or leather strips for the worst jobs. But nobody on this boat is offering you gloves. You're expected to toughen up or quit, and quitting isn't really an option when you're miles from shore. So you keep working, fingers moving through the net, untangling, sorting, bleeding quietly into the pile of fish that nobody will ever know or care about. The net itself is a marvel of medieval engineering, even as it destroys your hands. It's been knotted by hand, every single diamond-shaped opening created through careful, repetitive work. The mesh size is specific, large enough to let small fish escape, small enough to catch the profitable ones. Making these nets was a winter job, something fishermen and their families did when the weather was too rough for fishing. They'd sit by firelight, fingers flying, creating hundreds of feet of net that would then be tarred to resist rot. The tar smell is still strong on this net, mixing with the fish smell in a combination that's permanently burning itself into your memory. Now the net needs to be inspected for tears. This is your job, apparently, because you're useless at everything else, so you might as well do the tedious detail work. You run your hands along the mesh, feeling for breaks or weak spots. When you find one, and you find several, you have to tie it closed using a special knot that Alfric demonstrates once and expects you to remember forever. Your fingers are swollen now, stiff and clumsy, and the thin hemp cord he gives you for repairs might as well be thread for all the control you have. You fumble with it, dropping it twice, finally managing a knot that looks nothing like his example but at least holds the mesh together. "That'll do," Alfric says, which is probably the highest praise you're going to get today. Your hands are shaking from exhaustion and pain. You look down at them, really look, and they're unrecognizable. Swollen, bloody, covered in a mixture of fish slime and tar and salt. Your fingerprints have been worn smooth in places. There's a splinter the size of a toothpick embedded in your index finger that you don't even remember getting. Every joint aches when you try to make a fist. And then Alfric says the words you've been dreading. Time to cast again. The nets go back into the water, which means you're back on rope duty, hauling and pulling and feeling every fiber tear into your ruined hands. This cycle repeats 4, 5, 6 times throughout the day. Cast, wait, haul, untangle, repair, repeat. Medieval fishing was about volume. You couldn't keep fish fresh for long. Refrigeration wouldn't exist for centuries, so you caught as much as you could while you were out, then raced to get it back to shore for processing. Every haul brought more fish, more net work, more rope handling, more opportunities for your hands to be systematically destroyed. There's a particular type of rope burn you develop from wet hemp that's different from regular rope burn. The salt water keeps the wounds open and stinging. The rope fibers work their way under your skin like tiny splinters. You develop raw strips across your palms where the rope has consistently run, valleys of exposed flesh that weep clear fluid. By afternoon, you can barely grip anything without wanting to scream. Wolfston notices you cradling your hands and grunts something to Alfric. They have a brief exchange in a dialect you can barely understand, and then Wolfston produces a small clay pot from somewhere in the boat storage. Inside is a thick, greasy substance that smells like rancid animal fat mixed with pine tar. "For your hands," he says, and demonstrates by scooping out a glob and rubbing it into his own weathered palms. You follow suit, and the sting is immediate and intense, like rubbing salt into wounds, which essentially you are since the fat is probably preserved with salt. But then, gradually, there's a coating feeling, a slight numbing, a barrier between your destroyed skin and the world. This is tallow-rendered animal fat, mixed with tar and possibly some herbs that are supposed to help with healing. It's disgusting. It's greasy. It makes everything you touch slippery. But it also provides a tiny bit of relief. And in this moment, you'd kiss Wolfston's three-toothed mouth in gratitude if he'd let you. The medieval world had its folk remedies, its accumulated wisdom about how to treat the endless minor injuries that came with manual labor. This tallow mixture won't heal you, but it might keep your hands functional enough to finish the day. You learn to tie knots with numb, clumsy fingers. The bowline, the sheet bend, the clove hitch, these are the essential knots of sailing and fishing, and you need to be able to tie them in the dark, in a storm, with hands that no longer fully obey your brain's commands. Alfric is patient in his own gruff way, showing you repeatedly, but his patience has limits. "A man who can't tie his knots is a danger to the whole crew," he explains. "A loose rope in a storm can kill someone, so you practice, fumbling with the tarred hemp, trying to make your swollen fingers remember the patterns." The afternoon brings a fresh horror: splicing. One of the main ropes has frayed badly and needs to be spliced, essentially woven back together in a way that maintains its strength. This is skilled work, the kind of thing that takes years to master, and Alfric is having you do it because apparently you need to learn somehow. You watch him demonstrate on a practice piece, separating the rope into its component strands, weaving them through each other in a pattern that looks like a puzzle designed by someone who hates humanity. Then he hands you the real rope and walks away. You stare at this rope, this crucial piece of equipment that literally keeps the boat functional, and you're supposed to fix it with your hamburger hands. You separate the strands, which involves more fiber splinters working under your fingernails. You try to follow the pattern Alfric showed you, weaving over and under, but the wet hemp doesn't want to cooperate. It springs back, tangles. You have to undo your work 3 times before you get something that looks remotely like what he demonstrated. Your hands are cramping now, the muscles in your forearms burning from the fine motor control required. But you keep going because the alternative is admitting defeat, and medieval life didn't really allow for that. When you finally finish, Alfric inspects your work with the critical eye of someone who knows exactly how much his life depends on properly maintained equipment. He tugs on the splice, testing it, then nods. "It'll hold. Maybe." This is apparently a passing grade. You've created something that won't immediately kill everyone. Congratulations. The sun is starting its descent toward the horizon, which means it's time to head back to shore. But first, all the nets need to be properly coiled and stored. More rope work. More opportunities for your hands to be reminded that they're nothing but pain receptors wrapped in meat. You coil mechanically, muscle memory from the day's repetition taking over, and realize with horror that you've actually gotten slightly better at this. Your body is adapting, learning, becoming the tiniest bit more medieval with every passing hour. This should feel like an achievement, but mostly it just feels like betrayal by your own flesh. The sky has been shifting colors all afternoon, subtle gradations from blue to gray that you barely noticed while you were focused on not bleeding to death through your hands. But now Alfric is staring at the horizon with an intensity that makes your stomach clench. The clouds out there are darker, stacked in layers that look almost purple at their base. The wind has picked up too, shifting from the steady breeze that's been present all day to something gustier, more erratic. The boat rocks harder with each swell, and you notice the crew exchanging glances that communicate entire conversations without words. "Storm coming," Wolfston announces, which seems obvious even to you, but the way he says it carries weight. This isn't just an observation. It's a threat assessment, a calculation of survival odds, a recognition that the next few hours could go very wrong very quickly. Medieval fishermen didn't have weather forecasts. No satellite imagery, no meteorologists, no apps on their phones warning them about incoming fronts. They had the sky, the sea, their experience, and sometimes that ancient animal instinct that something bad was about to happen. You look around desperately for some kind of technology, some safety equipment, anything that might make the next part less terrifying. There's nothing. No radio to call for help. No life jackets, those won't be invented for centuries. No flares, no GPS beacon, no Coast Guard standing by. Just this wooden boat, these 5 men, and an ocean that's about to get angry. The realization hits you like a physical blow. If something goes wrong out here, you simply die. That's it. You drown, or the boat breaks apart and you drown, or you get swept overboard and you drown. There's no plan B. Alfric is barking orders now, moving with urgent purpose. Secure everything that can move. Check all rope ties. Get the sea anchor ready. You have no idea what a sea anchor is, but you're about to find out. It's essentially a large canvas cone, open at both ends, that gets deployed underwater to create drag and keep the boat pointed into the waves. The theory is that if you can keep the bow facing the oncoming swells, you're less likely to capsize when a big wave catches you broadside. The reality is that it's a desperate measure that sometimes works and sometimes just delays the inevitable. The crew moves like a machine now, all traces of the casual boredom from earlier replaced by focused intensity. Cuthbert is lashing down the fish barrels, making sure nothing can slide around the deck when things get rough. Wolfston is checking the mast. Yes, there's a small mast with a square sail that you haven't really paid attention to because you've been too busy suffering, making sure the rigging is secure. Another crew member whose name you never learned is bailing water more aggressively, trying to get the bilge as dry as possible before the storm hits and adds gallons more. You're standing there like an idiot, unsure what to do, when Alfric shoves a rope into your destroyed hands. "Tie yourself to the mast," he commands. "When the waves come, you hold on or you're gone. Understand. You understand. You understand that this rope is the difference between staying on the boat and becoming a permanent part of the North Sea. You wrap it around your waist with shaking hands, tie a knot that you pray to every god you can think of will hold, and grip the mast like it's the only solid thing in a dissolving world. The first major swell hits, and it's nothing like the gentle rocking you've been experiencing all day. The bow lifts, keeps lifting impossibly high until you're staring almost straight up at the sky. Then it drops, and your stomach doesn't follow for a second, suspended in that awful moment of free fall before the boat crashes into the trough with an impact that rattles your teeth. Water explodes over the sides, drenching everyone, filling the deck ankle deep before it drains through the scuppers. And this is just the beginning. Medieval fishermen read storms through a combination of observation and folklore that had been accumulating for generations. The color of the clouds mattered. Greenish clouds often meant hail, yellowish meant wind. The behavior of seabirds was crucial. Gulls flying inland meant they were fleeing weather that even they, masters of the air, didn't want to face. The smell of the air changed before storms. A peculiar metallic tang, ozone from lightning building in the clouds. Alfric had probably noticed all these signs hours ago, but judged we had time to finish the fishing. Now we're racing against weather that doesn't care about our schedule. The wind is screaming now, a physical presence that shoves at you, tries to rip you from the deck. The sail had been lowered earlier. Keeping it up in storm winds would shred it or worse, catch enough force to capsize the boat. So you're at the mercy of the waves. The boat climbs each swell, balances for a heart-stopping moment at the crest where you can see the full terrifying scope of the storm, then plunges down the other side. Every wave feels like it should be the last, the one that finally breaks the boat's back or fills it too full of water to recover. Historians still argue whether medieval sailors had sophisticated weather prediction methods or simply relied on luck and quick reactions. But watching Alfric work, you realize it's somewhere in between. He's constantly adjusting, reading each wave, anticipating the set patterns in the chaos. Waves come in groups, a series of smaller ones followed by a massive one, then the pattern repeats. Knowing this, watching for it, can mean the difference between taking a wave head-on versus getting caught sideways. You're soaked to the skin within minutes. The wool you're wearing, already damp from the day's work, is now completely saturated and weighs approximately 1,000 pounds. It clings to you, restricts your movement, and provides zero warmth. Medieval fishermen didn't have waterproof gear. No oilskins, no Gore-Tex, no wetsuits. Just wool, which has one advantage. It retains some insulating properties even when wet, but some is doing a lot of heavy lifting in that sentence. You're cold in a way that goes beyond discomfort into genuine danger. Your fingers are blue. Your lips won't stop chattering. Hypothermia is a very real possibility. Another wave crashes over the bow, and this one's bigger. It sweeps the entire length of the deck, grabbing at your legs, trying to pull you away. The rope around your waist goes taut, cutting into your ribs, and you realize with horror that if you tied it any looser, you'd be gone right now. Just gone. Swept into the churning gray water, too far for anyone to reach even if they wanted to risk their own lives trying. The sea doesn't give back what it takes. Wolfston is bailing frantically, using a wooden bucket to scoop water and heave it over the side, but it's like trying to empty the ocean with a teaspoon. For every bucket he removes, 2 more waves dump gallons back in. The boat sits lower in the water now, sluggish and heavy. If too much water accumulates, the boat will lose its buoyancy and simply sink, taking all of you with it. So he keeps bailing, and Cuthbert joins him, and eventually even you unwrap one hand from the mast to help, scooping and throwing, in a rhythm that has to be maintained or everyone dies. The sky is almost black now despite it being only late afternoon. Storm clouds have blotted out the sun completely, and the weird twilight that remains makes everything look surreal and nightmarish. Lightning flashes in the distance, far enough that you can't hear the thunder yet, but close enough to be a problem soon. You've never thought about lightning at sea, but now you're acutely aware that you're on a wooden boat with a wooden mast that's essentially a lightning rod, surrounded by conductive salt water, in the middle of the most exposed position possible. If lightning strikes the mast, everyone touching it is dead. But letting go means washing overboard. There are no good options. Alfric is shouting something, but the wind rips his words away. He gestures frantically, pointing to the stern, and you realize the rudder needs constant management. The person manning it, currently one of the nameless crew members, is fighting to keep the boat angled properly into the waves. If the boat turns parallel to the swells, a phenomenon called broaching, the next big wave will roll it over like a toy. So someone has to maintain that rudder position no matter what, muscles screaming, body battered by water, fighting the ocean's attempts to spin the boat sideways. There's a particular kind of seaweed, rockweed, that medieval sailors used as a crude barometer. When storm winds approached, this seaweed would feel different, drier somehow, as if it sensed the low pressure and changed texture. Fishermen checking their nets would notice it and know to head for harbor. But you're well past that warning stage now. Now you're in the part where you survive or you don't, where all the knowledge in the world means nothing if a wave hits wrong or the boat develops a leak or someone loses their grip and falls. Your world has shrunk to a series of immediate, desperate moments. Hold on. Breathe when you can. Bail water. Don't think about how tired you are. Don't think about how cold. Don't think about the fact that your hands have gone beyond pain into a numb uselessness that means you can't really feel if you're gripping the mast or not. Just hold on. The boat climbs another wave, this one even bigger, a moving mountain of gray water, and you see the coast in the distance. Land. Salvation. It looks impossibly far away. But Alfric is steering toward it, using every trick he knows. He's watching the waves, looking for patterns, exploiting the slight lulls between sets to make progress. Medieval navigation during storms was an art form. No compass. Those existed but weren't common on fishing boats. Instead, they used the waves themselves, the direction the swells were moving, the wind angle, the rare glimpses of coastline when the boat crested high enough. Alfric has a map in his head, built from decades of fishing these waters, every rock and shoal memorized. He's navigating by feel and experience, and your life depends entirely on his skill. The storm seems to last forever, but in reality it's probably only an hour, maybe two. Time loses meaning when every second is survival. You're locked into an eternal present of cold and fear and exhaustion. Your hands have frozen into claws around whatever you're holding. Your legs shake constantly, partly from cold, partly from the effort of staying upright on a deck that won't stop moving. You've stopped bailing because you literally can't lift your arms anymore. You just hang there, tied to the mast, and wait for either shore or death. Then, gradually, the waves get smaller. Not calm, nothing about this is calm, but smaller. The boat's motion becomes slightly less violent. The intervals between waves hitting lengthen. You dare to hope, and that's when Alfric's voice cuts through the wind. Harbor mouth ahead! You look up through salt-crusted eyes and see it. The narrow entrance to the harbor, stone breakwaters on either side, offering protection from the worst of the waves. It's the most beautiful thing you've ever seen. Getting through the harbor mouth requires precision that seems impossible given the conditions. Too far to one side and you'll smash into the rocks. Too far the other and you'll hit the opposite side. The waves are trying to push you sideways, the wind is gusting unpredictably, and the boat is waterlogged and sluggish. But Alfric threads the needle, barking orders to the rudder man, timing the approach to slip through during a relative lull. The boat enters the harbor, and suddenly the water is calmer. Not calm, but calmer, sheltered by the breakwaters from the worst of the storm. You made it. You're alive. Your body hasn't quite processed this information yet. Adrenaline still has you locked in survival mode. But slowly, as the boat limps toward the dock, as the crew begins the work of securing lines and assessing damage, the realization sinks in. You survived a medieval storm at sea with nothing but wood and rope and human determination. No technology saved you. No rescue was coming. Just skill and luck and the thin margin that separates another day of life from becoming a statistic that nobody will remember. Your hands are still frozen around the mast. Someone has to physically pry your fingers loose. The harbor is chaos controlled by exhaustion. Other boats are limping in as well, crews shouting to each other about conditions at sea, comparing damage, confirming that everyone made it back alive. The answer isn't always yes. Medieval fishing claimed lives with brutal regularity, and storm days were when the worst losses occurred. You see one boat missing part of its gunwale, another with its mast snapped off halfway up, and you realize with numb gratitude that your vessel is relatively intact. Battered, waterlogged, and possibly traumatized if boats can experience trauma, but intact. But there's no rest coming. The fish you caught earlier, the entire reason you risked your life today, are still aboard, and they're deteriorating by the minute. Medieval preservation techniques were limited and time-sensitive. Without ice or refrigeration, fish started spoiling within hours, especially in warmer months. Even now in the cold, they need to be processed immediately or the day's catch becomes worthless, which means your work is nowhere near finished. Alfric is already directing operations before the boat is fully tied to the dock. Sort the catch. Prime fish to the left, everything else right. Move. You stumble toward the pile of fish that have been sloshing around in the bilge water during the storm, and the smell hits you with renewed force. Storm-stressed fish released all sorts of biological fluids as they died. The mixture of fish waste, seawater, and the general filth of the boat has created an aroma that transcends mere bad smell and enters the realm of physical assault. You gag, but there's nothing left in your stomach to come up, so you just dry heave and get to work. The fish are slippery. Not just wet slippery, but covered in a mucus coating that makes them squirt out of your ruined hands like bars of soap. You're supposed to grab each one, assess its size and quality in a split second, and toss it to the appropriate pile. The cod needs special attention. They're the money fish, the ones that will fetch the best price at market. Alfric is particular about sorting them by size. The largest ones, the prime cod, will be sold fresh to wealthy households or monasteries. The medium ones will be salted for preservation. The small ones become food for the crew or animal feed. But first, you have to catch them. The fish are everywhere, sliding across the tilted deck as the boat rocks in the harbor swell. Some are still alive, gasping and flopping with surprising violence. You chase a large cod across the deck, finally pinning it with your knee while you grab it properly. Thrashes, its tail slapping your face with enough force to sting. Fish are stronger than you'd think, all muscle and desperation, and wrestling them into submission while your hands are numb and clumsy is its own special challenge. Cuthbert is working 3 times as fast as you, his young hands flying through the sorting process with casual efficiency. He grabs, assesses, tosses, grabs again in one fluid motion that probably looks effortless but represents years of practice. You, meanwhile, are still fumbling with your first fish, trying to determine if it's prime or just good, and what exactly the difference is supposed to be. The size, obviously, but also the firmness of the flesh, the brightness of the eyes, the color of the gills. There's a whole rubric of freshness that experienced fishermen can assess instantly and that you're just guessing at. That one's bait fish, Alfric says, pointing at the cod you've just carefully placed in the prime pile. Too small. Other side. You relocate it, embarrassed, and grab the next fish. This one is definitely bigger, so you toss it confidently toward the prime pile. That's a pollock, not cod, Alfric sighs. Different pile entirely. There are different piles? You look around and realize, yes, there are at least 6 different sorting categories happening on this deck, organized by species and size, and you understand approximately none of it. Historians still argue whether medieval fish markets had standardized grading systems or if it was more informal and negotiated, but the fishermen themselves clearly had standards. Their livelihoods depended on being able to identify quality instantly and sort accordingly. A prime cod might sell for 3 times what a small or damaged one would fetch. Mixing them would hurt profits and potentially damage relationships with buyers who expected consistency. So the sorting was taken seriously, and your incompetence at it is not winning you friends. The herring require different handling. They're smaller, more delicate, and they need to be packed in barrels immediately with layers of salt. Wolfston has produced several wooden barrels from storage and is demonstrating the technique. A layer of coarse salt, a layer of herring arranged neatly head to tail, another layer of salt. Repeat until the barrel is full. The salt will draw out moisture and preserve the fish for months, creating the salted herring that's a staple food across medieval Europe. Your job is to hand him the herring at a steady pace while he packs them. This sounds simple. It is not simple. The herring are even more slippery than the cod, and they're small enough that grabbing them requires precision your numb fingers don't possess. You drop every 3rd one. Some fall back into the bilge water and have to be retrieved. Others slide across the deck toward the scuppers, threatening to escape back into the harbor, and you have to scramble after them on your hands and knees, which is humiliating and painful because your knees are bruised from the storm and the deck is still covered in fish scales and worse. The salt burns. Remember all those cuts and blisters on your hands? The salt finds every single one. It's like dunking your hands in acid, a burning sensation that makes your eyes water and your breath catch. You try to hand Wolfston the herring without getting your hands in the barrel, but that's impossible. You have to reach in, arrange the fish properly, and every time you do, the salt attacks your wounds with fresh enthusiasm. By the 10th fish, you're whimpering. By the 20th, you've accepted that this is just your life now. Endless pain in service of preserving fish that you don't even like eating. Medieval salt was expensive, by the way. Not as expensive as spices, but valuable enough that wasting it was a serious offense. The salt being used here represents a significant investment. It's been purchased from salt traders, transported to the coastal village, and carefully stored until needed. Every grain that spills on the deck instead of staying in the barrel with the herring represents lost money. So when you accidentally knock over a small container of salt and watch it scatter across the filthy deck, the look Alfric gives you could freeze the ocean. "Scoop it up," he commands. You stare at the salt, now mixed with fish scales, bits of wood, traces of blood, and general deck filth. "You want me to?" "Scoop. Up." There's no arguing with that tone. You get down and start gathering the contaminated salt with your hands, depositing it back into a separate container that you're guessing will be used for something less particular than food preservation. Maybe for that rope preservation technique you witnessed earlier. The medieval world didn't waste anything, especially expensive imports. That salt will be used, and your clumsiness has just downgraded its purpose. The cod that have been designated for fresh sale need gutting, and this is where things get truly visceral. You've never gutted a fish before. Why would you? You buy fish at the grocery store, cleaned and filleted and wrapped in plastic. The closest you've come to fish anatomy is maybe ordering a whole fish at a restaurant and politely pushing it around your plate. Now you're holding a knife that's been sharpened so many times it's worn thin, and Alfric is showing you how to insert it into the fish's vent and slice forward toward the gills. "One smooth cut," he demonstrates. "Don't saw at it or you'll rupture the intestines." Nobody wants to buy fish covered in its own shit. He makes it look effortless, opening the fish's belly cavity and scooping out the guts with his hand in one practiced motion. The organs come out in a slippery mass. Intestines, liver, swim bladder, all connected and glistening. He tosses them over the side into the harbor water, where gulls immediately descend, screaming and fighting over the scraps. Your turn. You position the knife, take a breath, and cut. The blade goes in, but your angle is wrong and you end up making a jagged slash instead of a clean cut. The intestines are definitely ruptured. You can see partially digested food leaking out. The smell is indescribable. It's not just fish smell. It's fish digestion smell, fermented and concentrated. You gag again, fighting the urge to throw the entire fish as far away from you as possible. Alfric just shakes his head. "Next one. You'll get it eventually or you'll ruin all my good fish trying. Either way, keep going." You gut fish for what feels like hours. Your technique improves marginally. You stop rupturing the intestines every single time, at least, but it never becomes anything less than disgusting. The insides of fish are cold and slimy, and they stick to your hands no matter how many times you try to wipe them off. Fish blood gets under your already torn fingernails. Scales embed themselves in your forearms. At one point you reach up to push your hair out of your face and leave a streak of fish viscera across your forehead. Cuthbert sees this and actually laughs, a genuine moment of joy at your expense. You've become the boat's entertainment. The fish guts attract more than just gulls. Harbor rats emerge from wherever they hide during the day, bold and fat, to feast on the scraps. Medieval port cities were infested with rats, sustained by the constant supply of fish waste and grain spillage. These aren't cute pet rats. These are disease-carrying survivors with no fear of humans. One gets bold enough to run across your foot, and you yelp and kick at it reflexively. It dodges easily and continues toward a pile of herring intestines. Wolfston sees your reaction and grunts his amusement. "They're just hungry," he says, as if that makes having rats run across your feet acceptable. The prime cod, once gutted, need to be rinsed in clean seawater to remove any remaining blood or scales. You carry them 3 at a time to a section of the dock where cleaner water flows, dunk them, swish them around, and bring them back. Even this simple task is exhausting because you're carrying fish that weigh 5 to 10 pounds each, and your arms have been worked to destruction already. Each trip to the dock and back makes your shoulders burn, your back ache, your legs threaten to give out. But the fish keep coming because you caught a lot today, and every single one needs processing. Some fish are damaged, torn by the net, wounded by other fish, or crushed during the storm when barrels shifted. These get sorted into yet another category. They'll be sold at a discount to the poorest customers, or chopped up for use as bait in crab traps, or simply given to the crew as part of their payment. Medieval fishing crews often worked on a share system. A portion of the catch went to the boat owner, a portion to the captain, and portions to each crew member based on their role and seniority. As the useless newcomer, your share would be minimal, probably just enough damaged fish to take home for dinner and not much else. The work continues as the sun sets, because stopping means spoilage means losing money. Torches are lit on the dock, casting flickering orange light across the scene. Your shadow stretches and shrinks with the flame movement, making the whole enterprise feel even more surreal and medieval. Your hands move automatically now. Grab, assess, gut or sort or pack. Repeat. You're a machine running on empty, operating purely on the momentum of the day's suffering. Your mind has gone somewhere else, dissociated from your body to avoid processing the full extent of the misery. Finally, Alfric calls it done. The last fish is gutted, the last barrel is sealed, the last pile is accounted for. The deck is a massacre scene of scales and blood and seawater. Your clothes are beyond salvation, stiff with salt and slime. You smell like death's fish market. And now, theoretically, you get to go home and rest. Except there's still the boat to clean, the nets to hang for drying, the gear to secure. The work is never actually finished. It just pauses until tomorrow morning when it starts again. The barrels full of herring need to be moved off the boat. And this is where you discover that medieval manual labor has apparently saved its worst for last. Each barrel weighs somewhere between 100 and 150 pounds. Wood, fish, and salt combining into a mass that medieval workers somehow expected human beings to lift and carry. Alfric and Wolfston position themselves at opposite ends of a barrel, grip the rope handles, count to 3, and hoist it up with a coordinated grunt. They carry it down the narrow gangplank to the dock, where it will wait for the fish merchants to collect it in the morning. "Your turn," Alfric says, gesturing to you and Cuthbert. You look at the 14-year-old, then at the barrel, then back at Alfric, hoping this is some kind of joke. It's not a joke. Cuthbert is already in position at one end, waiting for you to take the other. You bend down, grip the rope handles with your destroyed hands, and immediately understand that this is going to be a disaster. The rope cuts into your palms where the blisters were, and when you try to lift, your arms simply refuse. They've been worked past their limit, and they're staging a rebellion. Cuthbert lifts his end anyway, which means your end stays on the ground and the barrel tilts at a dangerous angle. "Lift!" he hisses. You summon strength from somewhere, probably the primitive part of your brain that's terrified of looking weaker than a teenager, and haul upward. The barrel rises a few inches. Your back screams. Your legs shake. Your grip is already slipping because your hands are too damaged to maintain purchase on the rope. You take one shuffling step toward the gangplank and nearly drop your end. The barrel lurches, and Cuthbert has to compensate, catching more of the weight to keep it from crashing down. The gangplank is maybe 10 feet long, but it's narrow, slippery from fish slime and seawater, and it bounces with every step. You have to walk backward because you've got the trailing end of the barrel, which means you can't see where you're stepping. Cuthbert, walking forward, is supposed to guide you with verbal cues, but his English is heavily accented with dialect, and between your exhaustion and the general chaos of the harbor, your understanding may be half of what he's saying. You step, the plank bounces, you overcorrect, and your foot slides sideways. For a heart-stopping moment, you're sure you're going into the water. You, the barrel, everything, but somehow you catch yourself. Your knee slams into the edge of the gangplank, adding a fresh explosion of pain to your collection. But you don't fall. You don't drop the barrel. Cuthbert mutters something that you're fairly certain translates to useless landlubber. But you make it to the dock. You set the barrel down with zero grace, letting it thump onto the wooden planks harder than you should, earning another disapproving look from Alfric. There are 6 more barrels to move. Your body has nothing left to give, but somehow you give it anyway, because the alternative is admitting complete defeat and probably getting left behind when the boat goes out again tomorrow. If you can't do the work, you don't eat. It's that simple in the medieval economy. No work, no pay. No pay, no food. No food, no life. So you lift and carry, each trip across that gangplank feeling like a journey through personal hell designed specifically to break you. Medieval workers developed hernias at alarming rates from exactly this kind of labor. Without understanding proper lifting technique or having access to mechanical aids, men simply used brute force and hoped their bodies held up. Many didn't. You see older men on the docks moving stiffly, favoring one side, evidence of backs ruined by decades of this abuse. At your current rate of deterioration, you'd be one of them by age 30 if you survived that long. The human body wasn't designed for this level of sustained physical punishment, but medieval life didn't care about design specifications. Once the barrels are on the dock, the cod that were designated for fresh sale need to be transported to the fish market. This involves loading them into baskets, large woven things that hold maybe 20 fish each, and carrying those baskets on your back. The baskets have shoulder straps made of rough rope, because of course they do, and the weight distribution is terrible. All the fish settle at the bottom, pulling backward, trying to drag you to the ground. You lean forward to compensate, which puts strain on your lower back that joins the symphony of pain already playing throughout your body. The market is uphill from the harbor, because of course it is. Medieval towns were built with defense and drainage in mind, not convenience for exhausted fishermen. The street, and calling it a street is generous. It's more like a muddy path between buildings, winds upward at an angle that would be challenging fresh and rested. In your current state, carrying a basket of fish, it's nearly impossible. Your legs burn with lactic acid. Your lungs heave trying to get enough oxygen. Sweat pours down your face despite the cold evening air, and it stings when it runs into your eyes and mixes with the salt that's encrusted there. Other fishermen are making the same journey, a procession of bent backs and heavy loads trudging up from the harbor. Some are actually singing work songs that provide rhythm for the walking. You can't fathom having enough breath to sing right now, but the songs apparently serve a purpose. They coordinate movement, make the work feel communal, and distract from the suffering. The lyrics are simple and repetitive, something about fish and silver and the sea's bounty, and everyone knows the words because they've been singing this same song since childhood. Cuthbert walks beside you, his smaller basket looking almost easy on his young frame. First day's always hardest, he offers, which is probably meant to be encouraging, but just makes you realize that people do this every day. Tomorrow, if you survive the night, you'll wake up more sore than you've ever been in your life and have to do this all over again. And the day after that, and the day after that, Medieval life was just repetitive suffering punctuated by occasional moments of not suffering. The fish market is a covered area with stone pillars supporting a wooden roof, and it's already busy despite the late hour. Merchants are setting up their stalls for the early morning trade. Housewives and monastery servants who need fish for tomorrow's meals are already browsing, assessing quality, negotiating prices. The noise is overwhelming. People shouting prices, arguing about freshness, laughing at jokes you don't understand. The smell is fish multiplied by 100. Every stall representing a different catch, different levels of freshness, different species all competing to assault your nose. You lower your basket to the ground with a groan of relief, and immediately a merchant descends on you. He's got the sharp eyes of someone who makes his living exploiting fishermen, and he starts poking through your fish with a wooden stick, pulling up examples, checking gills and eyes and firmness. "These are yesterday's catch," he declares, which is an outright lie. You caught them literally today, but this is apparently part of the negotiation game. Alfric, who's followed you to the market, steps in. "Caught this morning, processed within hours. You know quality when you see it, Osbert. Don't insult my fish." What follows is a rapid-fire exchange in a dialect that's hard to follow, numbers and qualities and market conditions all thrown around with the speed of people who've been playing this game for decades. The merchant picks up a cod, squeezes it, sniffs it, and makes a face like it's personally offended him. Alfric counters with something about the storm and risk and fair compensation for men who nearly died to bring this catch to market. Historians still argue whether medieval fish markets operated on fixed prices or pure negotiation. But watching this exchange, it's clearly the latter. Every transaction is a battle. The merchant is trying to pay as little as possible because he needs to mark up the price to make his own profit. The fishermen need to get enough to cover their costs, boat maintenance, net repairs, salt purchases, plus feed their families. The gap between those two positions is where the arguing happens, and it's loud and involves dramatic gestures and probably some creative cursing that you're glad you don't fully understand. Eventually, they settle on a price. The merchant counts out coins into Alfric's palm, silver pennies, the standard currency, each one representing a day's food for a common laborer. You watch Alfric count them carefully, bite one to test its authenticity. Soft metal means silver, hard means forgery, and then pocket them. The merchant starts loading the cod into his own baskets, and you realize that your basket, the one you just carried uphill at great personal cost, now has to go back to the boat empty so you can do this all over again with the next load. But first, Alfric divides the money. This is the moment that determines whether your suffering was worth anything. He counts out shares based on the boat's economics. A large share for himself as boat owner and captain, smaller shares for Wolfston and the other experienced crew, and then he gets to you. He places 3 coins in your battered palm. 3. You stare at them, unable to believe that an entire day of agony has earned you what amounts to maybe 3 days' worth of basic food. "You'll earn more when you're useful," Alfric says, not unkindly. "Today you were learning. Learning doesn't pay much. It's fair, you suppose, in the brutal logic of medieval economics. You weren't productive. You were a liability who needed constant correction and probably cost the crew time and efficiency. These 3 coins represent charity as much as payment, an investment in training you to potentially be worthwhile in the future. If you come back, if you survive the night, the walk back to the boat is downhill at least, but your empty basket feels like it weighs more than the full one did. Your body has realized that the day's work is ending and has started to shut down preemptively. Your legs move in a shuffle rather than proper steps. Your shoulders have frozen into a hunched position from hours of carrying weight. You're probably developing a permanent slouch that will mark you as a laborer for the rest of your life, one of those physical deformities that medieval people just accepted as the cost of survival. Back at the boat, there's still the cleaning to do. The deck needs to be scrubbed of fish scales and blood, or it will attract rats and rot the wood and generally make tomorrow even worse than it needs to be. Seawater and stiff brushes are the tools, and yes, you're expected to get down on your hands and knees and scrub. Your knees, already bruised from various impacts throughout the day, press into the wooden deck, and you realize there are actually fish scales embedded in your kneecaps, worked into the skin somehow. You pick at them while you're supposed to be scrubbing, and Wolfston grunts at you to focus. The scrubbing reveals just how disgusting the deck really is. There are layers of grime that have accumulated over weeks or months, fish oil soaked into the wood grain, dark stains that could be blood or tar or something worse. Your brush makes little headway against the industrial-grade filth. The seawater you're using to rinse isn't exactly clean either. It's harbor water, which means it's contaminated with sewage and fish waste and all the runoff from the town. You're essentially cleaning dirt with dirty water, but this is apparently the standard procedure. The salt that spilled earlier has left white residue everywhere, crystallized in the cracks between planks. It needs to be scraped out or it will corrode the iron nails holding the boat together. This job requires a small knife and patience and fine motor control that you no longer possess. You scrape clumsily, making grooves in the wood, probably doing more damage than good. Cuthbert takes the knife away from you gently and demonstrates the proper technique. Short, controlled strokes that lift the salt without gouging the wood. You try to replicate it and fail, so he just assigns you to coiling rope instead. A job even you can't mess up too badly at this point. The nets need to be hung to dry or they'll rot and be useless by tomorrow. This involves draping them over wooden racks near the boat, spreading them carefully so no sections overlap. Wet hemp rope touching wet hemp rope in a pile equals mold, and moldy nets are weak nets. The spreading process takes forever because the nets are long and heavy and tangled from the day's use, and your fingers are too stiff to work out the knots efficiently. You're still at it when the last of the daylight fades completely and you're working by torchlight, your shadow dancing across the nets like some kind of exhausted ghost. Finally, truly finally, Alfric declares the work complete. The boat is secure, the gear is stowed, the catch is sold or preserved. You're dismissed. You can leave. You're free to drag your ruined body back to whatever accommodation you're imagining exists in this medieval fishing village and collapse into unconsciousness. Alfric gives you a nod that might be respect or might just be acknowledgement that you survived. Tomorrow dawn. Be here or don't. Your choice. It doesn't feel like a choice. Feels like a threat. You stumble away from the boat, every step a negotiation with muscles that have forgotten how to work properly, and that's when you remember, you still have to be careful about what you say and do. The physical torture of the day has made you forget that medieval fishing crews operated under a complex web of superstitions and taboos that could get you thrown overboard or worse. You're exhausted enough that your modern brain's filter is completely offline, which means you're one casual comment away from becoming the boat's bad luck charm. The first rule you should have learned this morning but didn't: never mention certain words on a boat. Rabbit is forbidden. Pig is forbidden. Church is definitely forbidden, and priests are viewed with suspicion at best. The reasoning varies. Some say rabbits are witches' familiars, others that pigs are unclean in a way that offends the sea, but the prohibition is absolute. You watch an older fisherman from another crew spit 3 times and make a warding gesture because someone on the dock mentioned having rabbit stew for dinner. The superstition is that powerful, that immediate. Women on boats are complicated. Some regions considered them terrible luck. Others believed fishermen's wives specifically brought protection. But menstruating women? Universally forbidden. The belief was that their presence would drive fish away, anger the sea, guarantee disaster. You're grateful you don't have to navigate that particular medieval nightmare, but you see how it affected the fishing community. Women doing enormous amounts of the shore-based work, mending nets and smoking fish and managing money, but forever barred from the boats themselves in many places. Words matter. You can't say drown on a boat. You can't talk about death or disaster. Even mentioning that someone died at sea recently is inviting their ghost to haunt your vessel. Medieval fishermen developed entire alternative vocabularies, code words, and euphemisms for dangerous concepts. A drowned man wasn't drowned, he was gone to the sea or taken by the waves. A storm wasn't a storm, it was rough weather or the sea's temper. This linguistic dancing was constant and exhausting, one more mental burden on top of the physical ones. Historians still argue whether these superstitions genuinely affected fishing practices or were simply cultural window dressing. But the consequences for violations were real enough. You hear a story, shared in hushed tones as crews work nearby, about a fisherman 2 villages over who brought his wife's cat aboard for mousing duties. The cat was black. The next day, the nets came up empty. The day after, a crew member fell overboard. By the 3rd day, the other fishermen had tied the cat in a sack with stones and thrown it into the harbor, and they seriously considered doing the same to the man who'd brought it. He ended up blacklisted, unable to crew on any boat for an entire season. Whistling on a boat is forbidden. It calls up winds that might become storms. You catch yourself about to whistle tunelessly, a nervous habit, and bite your tongue just in time. Alfric is watching, and from the look on his weathered face, you've just barely avoided a serious transgression. "Control your mouth," he says quietly. The sea hears everything, and she doesn't forget insults. He's completely serious. This isn't quaint folklore to him. This is survival protocol, tested over generations. The color green is unlucky. You notice that none of the crew wear green clothing, and the boat itself has no green paint anywhere. This superstition supposedly stems from green being the color of land, and wearing it at sea shows you're not committed to the ocean's realm. Or maybe it's because green was the color of the fairies, who were known to cause mischief. The origin doesn't matter as much as the adherence. You see a young fisherman on another crew get physically shoved because his tunic has green threads woven into the brown. "Change it or stay on land," his captain commands. Starting a voyage on a Friday is absolutely forbidden. Friday is the day Christ died, and therefore no good thing can begin on a Friday. Medieval fishing boats would literally wait in harbor, catch rotting, money bleeding away, rather than leave on a Friday. The economic cost must have been significant, but the spiritual cost of defying the superstition was believed to be higher. You'd risk certain financial loss over possible divine retribution. That calculation tells you everything about the medieval relationship with religion and risk. Meeting a priest or a red-haired woman on the way to the boat in the morning means you turn around and go home. The day is cursed before it starts. You witness this firsthand when one of Wolfston's crew spots a monk walking near the docks at dawn. The entire crew stops, debates briefly, and then heads to the tavern to wait out the morning, forfeiting an entire day's fishing because a holy man had the audacity to take a morning walk. The economic impact is real, but the fear is realer. Blood sacrifice happened, and probably still happens in secret. Not human sacrifice, that's been officially forbidden for centuries, but animal blood to appease the sea. You notice small dark stains on the bow of Alfric's boat that look deliberate, ritualistic. When you ask about them, Cuthbert goes quiet, then eventually admits that at the season's start, a chicken's throat is cut over the prow. The blood feeds the sea, ensures her cooperation, pays rent for using her resources. The Catholic Church would frown on this pagan holdover, but the Church isn't out here risking its life on wooden boats. Certain fish are considered messengers or warnings. Catching an unusual species means something good or bad depends on which species and local interpretation. You watch a crew on another boat pull up something weird, an eel-like creature you don't recognize, and the captain's face goes white. They throw it back immediately, making signs against evil, and you hear muttered prayers in Latin, the magical language of protection. Whatever that fish signified, it wasn't good. and the entire crew is rattled for the rest of the day. The sea herself is personified, gendered female, temperamental and demanding. You can't insult her. You can't take her for granted. Fishermen pour libations of ale over the side before starting work, whispering requests or thanks depending on the day's needs. It looks like waste, good ale going into salt water, but it's insurance. The sea might not actually drink ale, but she notices the gesture, or so the belief goes. Respect must be shown, always, or she'll show you what disrespect costs. Names matter. The boat's name can't be changed once christened. Doing so confuses her spirit and invites disaster. Ships are living things in the medieval imagination, with personalities and preferences and the ability to be offended. Alfric's boat is called Sea Blessing, and he touches her hull gently sometimes, the way you'd pet a loyal dog. It's not cute folklore. It's genuine relationship building with the vessel that keeps him alive. There are rituals for everything. Before casting nets, you make a certain gesture. Before pulling them up, another gesture. Some crews pray, others use older invocations that predate Christianity but have been superficially baptized by adding "in Christ's name" to the end. The church tolerates this syncretism because trying to stamp it out would be impossible. The sea came before the church, and fishermen remember that. You learn that stepping onto a boat with your left foot first is catastrophic. Right foot only, always. You watch Cuthbert actually hop on one foot to make sure his right contacts the deck first. When you ask why, he looks at you like you're insane. Left is sinister, he says, using the Latin word that means both left and evil. You want to bring evil aboard? The linguistic connection between left-handedness and wickedness is built into the culture so deeply that nobody questions it. Certain words bring luck. Silver darlings for herring. Calling them by this affectionate name supposedly makes them more likely to fill your nets. The gray geese for seal, because naming them directly might offend them, and seals are believed to be transformed humans or fey creatures in many coastal legends. The vocabulary is coded, protective, designed to navigate a world where words have power beyond their literal meanings. You nearly destroy everything when, exhausted and not thinking, you mention having seen a rat on the boat earlier. The temperature drops. Everyone stops working. Wolfston's hand moves toward the knife at his belt, and for a terrifying moment you think he might actually stab you. "We don't talk about them," Alfric says through clenched teeth. "They're passengers, not problems. Speaking of them makes them bold. You've violated a cardinal rule. Rats on boats are inevitable, but acknowledging them verbally gives them power, makes them multiply, brings plague and ruin. You have to make amends immediately." Alfric instructs you to spit over your left shoulder 3 times, walk around the mast counterclockwise, and throw a pinch of salt into the water. It feels absurd, performative, but everyone is watching to ensure you do it correctly. This isn't about the actual physical actions. It's about demonstrating that you respect the codes that keep the crew unified and the boat safe. Social cohesion on a medieval fishing boat is maintained through shared belief systems, and threatening those systems threatens everything. The thing is, these superstitions probably did serve real purposes beyond pure irrationality. The prohibition on whistling prevented crew members from accidentally signaling in ways that might confuse actual whistle commands during emergencies. The Friday rule ensured everyone started the week on the same day, creating schedule predictability. The ban on certain words kept morale up by preventing defeatist talk. The rituals created rhythm and routine in chaotic, dangerous work. But try explaining psychological and social functionality to exhausted medieval fishermen, and they'll tell you no, it's actually about appeasing the sea's wrath. You realize you're going to have to learn all these rules, memorize them as thoroughly as knot tying or net mending, because violating them makes you a pariah. A crew that doesn't trust you won't take you aboard. A reputation as a jinx means unemployment and probably starvation. So you file away each prohibition, each requirement, each bizarre ritual, adding mental burden to the physical exhaustion. Medieval life wasn't just physically harder, it was cognitively more demanding in ways modern people don't appreciate, requiring constant navigation of invisible rules that could turn deadly if ignored. The village you're walking through has its own superstitions. Don't walk past the fish-smoking sheds at night. The smoke contains the spirits of the fish, and they might follow you home. Don't count your money where others can see. It invites envy, and envy can become a curse. Don't praise a child's health or beauty without adding "God preserve them," or you might attract the evil eye that will strike them down. Every action has spiritual implications, every word potentially dangerous. You pass a small shrine at a crossroads, a wooden cross with fishing net draped over it, small offerings of bread and coins at its base. This is where fishermen pray before embarking, where widows pray for their husband's safe return. The Christianity and the old ways are so tangled here it's impossible to separate them. The cross is Christian, but the net offerings and the location at a crossroads speak to older traditions. Medieval faith was syncretic, practical, willing to hedge all bets because when your life depends on the sea's mercy, you don't dismiss any potential source of protection. Someone calls out to you, one of the crew from another boat. "How'd you fare today, newcomer?" It's a simple question, but you hesitate because you don't know the right answer. Complaining might mark you as weak. Boasting might invite jealousy or seem like tempting fate. You settle on "survived," which gets a knowing laugh. "That's the first victory," he agrees. "Tomorrow you'll aim for useful. Good luck." He makes a gesture you don't recognize. 2 fingers touching his forehead, then sweeping outward, and you mimic it back because it seems expected. Only later do you learn it's a ward against drowning, a blessing exchanged between fishermen. Dawn comes too early, gray light filtering through whatever hovel you've collapsed in, and your body screams in ways you didn't know were possible. Every muscle is locked, every joint frozen, every movement in agony that makes you question whether being alive is actually preferable to the alternative. But you drag yourself upright because today is market day, the day when all that suffering gets converted into actual money, and you're about to discover that the economic realities of medieval fishing are designed to crush whatever spirit the physical labor hasn't already destroyed. The fish you caught, the ones you bled for, nearly drowned for, ruined your hands for, are already at the market. The barrels of salted herring, the prime cod, all of it arranged in stalls run by merchants who didn't risk anything but are about to take the largest cut of the profits. This is how the medieval economy works. The people who do the dangerous work get paid last and least, while middlemen who merely facilitate transactions extract maximum value. It's a system that's been functioning for centuries and will continue for centuries more, grinding up laborers and spitting out just enough coins to keep them alive for another round. You arrive at the market behind Alfric, and it's already chaos. Housewives are arguing with merchants over prices. Monastery stewards are inspecting fish with the critical eye of people who answer to abbots who won't tolerate substandard goods. Street vendors are buying small quantities to resell in different parts of town at markup. Everyone's trying to get the best deal, which means everyone's lying about quality, freshness, and fair market value. Welcome to commerce in an era before consumer protection or honest weights and measures enforcement. The merchant selling your catch, Osbert, the one who negotiated with Alfric yesterday, has marked up the prices substantially. The cod that he paid maybe 3 pennies for is being sold for 8 or 9. The herring that cost him 2 pennies per barrel are being retailed at 5. He's tripling his money, sometimes more, and he's doing it by simply standing in a market stall and pointing at fish. Meanwhile, you risk death by drowning, hypothermia, and crushing to earn your pathetic 3 pennies. The mathematics of exploitation are brutally clear. "That's how it works," Alfric says when he sees you calculating. "We take the risks, they take the profits. Always been that way. He doesn't sound bitter exactly, more resigned. This is the fundamental structure of medieval economic life. Fishermen don't have the capital to operate their own market stalls, don't have the connections to negotiate with monastery purchasing agents, don't have the time to retail their catch piece by piece. They need the merchants, and the merchants know it, and that knowledge gets reflected in the price negotiations that consistently favor the people with leverage. But it gets worse, much worse, because not all the catch sells immediately. Fish is perishable, and without modern refrigeration, every hour that passes reduces value. The prime cod from yesterday is already less prime today. By tomorrow it'll be ordinary. By the day after it'll be animal feed. This time pressure is a weapon the merchants wield expertly. They can afford to wait, to play disinterested, to let fish age while fishermen sweat about spoilage. Then they swoop in with lowball offers that fishermen have to accept because something is better than nothing. You watch Osbert negotiate with a desperate fisherman who's been trying to sell his catch since dawn. The fish are starting to smell. Not rotten yet, but heading that direction. Osbert offers half of yesterday's price. The fisherman argues, pleads, explains about his family and debts and the cost of net repairs. Osbert shrugs, completely unmoved. Sell it to someone else then. He says, knowing there is no one else, knowing the fisherman is trapped. Eventually the fisherman accepts, and you see him fighting back tears as he takes coins that won't cover his costs for the day. Historians still argue whether medieval markets were genuinely competitive or if merchant cartels controlled prices. But watching this, the answer seems obvious. The merchants coordinate informally. You see them exchanging glances, nodding slightly, creating an unspoken agreement not to undercut each other. Why compete when they can collectively negotiate from strength? The fishermen, meanwhile, are fragmented, each crew desperate to sell their own catch, unable to organize any kind of unified resistance to merchant pricing. The monastery steward arrives, and suddenly Osbert becomes deferential, almost obsequious. Religious institutions are major customers. All those monks and nuns need to eat, and church rules mandate fish on Fridays and during Lent. This gives monastery buyers enormous leverage. They purchase in bulk, they pay relatively promptly, and they're consistent customers. Offending them means losing access to a crucial market. So Osbert offers better prices to the steward than he's offered anyone else, and he throws an extra fish as a gesture of goodwill, creating a relationship that benefits him long-term even if it costs him short-term profit. You're starting to understand the full economic chain now. The fishermen catch the fish and get paid perhaps 20% of the eventual retail value. The merchants mark it up and take 40 to 50%. If the fish goes through additional middlemen, someone who transports it inland, someone who retails it in a different town, they each take their cuts. By the time fish caught off this coast makes it to a wealthy household's table 50 miles inland, it might cost 10 times what the fisherman was paid. All that markup is paying for convenience and distribution, sure, but mostly it's paying for the fact that certain people in the economic chain have leverage and others don't. Debt is the other weapon. Many fishermen don't own their boats. They're working for boat owners who might be retired fishermen, or merchants, or even nobility who view fishing boats as investments. These owners take the largest share of the catch, sometimes half or more, justified by the fact that they're providing the capital equipment. The fishermen are essentially employees, but without any of the protections that word implies in modern contexts. No minimum wage, no guaranteed hours, no safety regulations. Just work and hope the owner is fair, and know that he probably isn't. Alfric is fortunate. He owns his boat, inherited from his father. But you learn that he's deeply in debt for net repairs and sail replacement. Last winter's storms damaged equipment that took months of earnings to fix. He borrowed money from a local merchant at interest rates that would be illegal in any modern context. 20–30%, maybe more. The debt traps him in a cycle. He has to fish constantly to service the interest, but fishing costs money for salt and repairs, so he's never actually paying down the principal. He'll die in debt, and his sons will inherit both the boat and the obligation. The women selling fish at retail stalls are mostly fishermen's wives and daughters, and they're getting crushed too. They buy fish from the merchants at markup, then try to sell it at even higher markup in different parts of town where people can't easily get to the main market. Their margins are razor thin, competition is fierce, and spoilage is a constant threat. You watch one woman realize that the fish she bought this morning has gone bad in the afternoon sun. She's lost her entire investment for the day, money her family needed for rent or food or survival. She doesn't cry or rage. She just accepts it with the stoic exhaustion of someone for whom disaster is routine. Child labor is everywhere in the market. Kids maybe 7 or 8 years old are carrying baskets of fish, making deliveries, helping at stalls. They're not being paid. They're working for their families because everyone has to contribute or the family doesn't eat. Cuthbert is actually lucky. At 14, he's earning a crew share on the boat. These younger kids are just unpaid labor, their childhood's sacrifice to economic necessity. Medieval people didn't sentimentalize childhood the way modern cultures do. Children were small adults, expected to work as soon as they were physically capable. The taxation situation is its own nightmare. The church takes tithes. 10% of your catch is supposed to go to the local parish. In practice, this is negotiable and often paid in inferior fish, but it's still an obligation that reduces your earnings. Then there are the Lord's taxes if you're fishing in his waters, which most coastal fishermen are. Another cut. Port fees for using the harbor facilities. Fees for selling in the market. By the time all the formal and informal taxes are paid, fishermen are keeping maybe half of their already meager earnings. And if you can't pay, debt bondage is real. You can end up essentially enslaved to your creditors, working off obligations that grow faster than you can pay them. Your children inherit the debt. You lose whatever autonomy you had. Some fishermen flee their villages to escape impossible debts, but then they're rootless strangers with no connections, no trust, vulnerable to even worse exploitation in unfamiliar ports. There's no good escape from the trap. Osbert notices you watching his transactions and calls you over. Want to learn the business side? He asks, and you realize this is a test or maybe an offer. The path from fisherman to merchant is possible. Difficult, requiring capital and connections and luck, but possible. Some successful fishermen eventually transition to buying and selling rather than catching. It's less physically destructive and far more profitable. But it requires becoming the kind of person who can look at desperate men and pay them pennies for their suffering. It requires developing calluses on your conscience to match the ones on your hands. He shows you his accounting system, which is sophisticated in its own way. He keeps track of which crews produce the best fish, which are reliable, which are desperate enough to accept bad deals. He knows the seasonal patterns, when herring run, when cod are most plentiful, when prices peak due to religious observances. He's tracking weather patterns and monastery buying schedules and the harvest calendar because when crops fail, people buy more fish as grain prices spike. He's running a complex operation, and it's actually impressive in a morally repugnant sort of way. Smart men work with their heads, not their backs, Osbert says, and he's not wrong. Manual labor destroys your body, and destroyed bodies can't work, which means poverty and probably early death. The only escape is accumulating enough capital to stop being the person who does the dangerous work and become the person who profits from others doing it. It's a system that perpetuates itself, grinding up new generations of fishermen to enrich merchants and boat owners and ultimately the nobility and church who sit at the top of the economic pyramid, never touching a fish or a net but taking their cuts of everything. You look at your ruined hands, think about your 3 pennies that won't even cover food for 3 days, let alone accommodation or replacement clothes or anything else you might need, and realize the full scope of the trap. To earn more, you'd need to become more skilled, but becoming skilled requires surviving long enough to learn, which requires money to eat, which requires working, which destroys your body faster than you can develop skills. The cycle is vicious and intentional. The system needs a steady supply of desperate laborers, and it creates the conditions that ensure that supply never runs out. Alfred collects his payment from Osbert. More coins than you'll see this week, but still a fraction of what the fish will eventually generate, and divides it among the crew. Your share is slightly larger today because you were marginally less useless, but it's still pathetic. You'll earn full shares when you can do a full man's work, Alfred explains. Until then, you're an investment. I'm feeding you and teaching you, and eventually that pays off for both of us. If you survive. That last bit isn't a joke. Medieval fishing has an attrition rate that would horrify modern occupational safety boards. Some men drown. Others are crippled by injury and can't work anymore. Some just burn out, their bodies giving up before their spirits do. For every successful middle-aged fisherman like Alfred, there are dozens who didn't make it that far. You're joining an industry with a mortality rate somewhere between coal mining and frontline combat. Except at least soldiers might get glory and pension. Fishermen get 3 pennies and an early grave. The sun has finally set, and Alfred announces that you're taking the night watch. Your entire body rebels at this information. Every cell is screaming for sleep, for rest, for mercy that isn't coming. But someone has to guard the boat overnight. Theft is common in medieval ports where poverty is universal and a boat full of equipment represents more wealth than most people will see in a year. So you'll stay awake, alone, watching over a vessel you barely know how to operate, in the dark, for hours that will feel like years. The dock at night is a different world entirely. The merchants have closed their stalls. The crowds have dispersed. And what remains is shadows and silence punctuated by unsettling noises you can't identify. Water slapping against hulls creates a rhythm that's almost hypnotic. Ropes creak. Wood groans. Somewhere a dog is barking with the persistence of an animal that knows something you don't. The few torches still burning cast moving shadows that look like people but aren't, or maybe they are and you just can't tell from this distance. You're sitting on a coil of rope on the deck, wrapped in a wool blanket that smells like fish and provides minimal warmth. The harbor water is black glass reflecting fragments of moonlight. No streetlights, obviously. No electric glow from buildings. Just darkness so complete that you can barely see your hand when you hold it in front of your face. Medieval nights were dark in a way modern people simply don't experience. The kind of dark that presses against you, that feels alive and watching. The cold is worse at night somehow. The temperature has dropped, and the moisture from being on the water all day has seeped into your bones. Your teeth chatter despite the blanket. Your fingers and toes are numb again, different from the working numbness of earlier, more like they've given up entirely on maintaining temperature. Hypothermia is a genuine risk, but you can't leave the boat to warm up. That's literally your entire job. Stay with the boat, stay awake, stay alert. Staying awake is the hardest part. Your body is so exhausted that consciousness feels like an active effort, something you have to fight for every minute. Your eyelids weigh approximately 1,000 pounds each. Your head keeps dropping forward, snapping back up when you realize you've nodded off. You stand and pace the deck, forcing movement to generate alertness, but your legs are so tired that walking feels like wading through mud. You pinch yourself, bite your cheek, splash cold harbor water on your face. Anything to maintain wakefulness. The sounds of the harbor at night are genuinely unsettling. That water-slapping noise occasionally sounds like footsteps. The creaking could be someone climbing aboard, or it could be the boat settling, and you can't tell the difference. Rats move through the darkness with surprising boldness, their eyes reflecting what little light exists, dozens of them foraging among the boats. You remember you're not supposed to acknowledge them, which is difficult when one runs across your foot and you have to suppress a yelp that wants to become a scream. Medieval people believed in nightwalkers, spirits of the drowned who returned to the docks looking for the boats that killed them. You tell yourself this is superstitious nonsense, but alone in the dark with exhaustion making your perception unreliable, it's easy to believe in ghosts. Every shadow could be something. That movement at the edge of your vision, was that just a rope swaying? Or was it something else? You don't look directly because part of you doesn't want to know. Historians still argue whether medieval people were genuinely more fearful at night or simply more pragmatic about acknowledging real dangers like thieves and wild animals. But the distinction doesn't matter much when you're living it. The fear is real regardless of its source. Your heart races at every unexpected noise. Your breathing gets shallow. The adrenaline that helped you survive the day's physical labor now keeps you wired and twitchy, jumping at shadows, convinced that every moment might bring catastrophe. Other boats have watchmen too, you realize. Across the harbor, you can make out a figure on another vessel, a darker shadow against the darkness. Knowing you're not completely alone is marginally comforting, but also weird. You're too far apart to communicate, but close enough to be aware of each other, two exhausted humans performing the same pointless feeling vigil. If thieves came, what could either of you actually do? You're unarmed except for a small knife. You're exhausted. You're one person against however many attackers might arrive. The watchman system is probably more about making noise and attracting attention than actually fighting off criminals. The hours crawl past with agonizing slowness. You've lost all sense of time. There's no way to check. No clock tower chiming the hours in this small fishing village. Just endless darkness that might have lasted 1 hour or 6. You genuinely cannot tell. Your mind starts playing tricks, creating patterns in the randomness. You hear voices in the wind. You see shapes in the shadows that resolve into nothing when you look directly at them. Exhaustion-induced hallucinations are a real thing, and you're entering that territory. A light appears on the water, distant and moving. Your heart stops. A light on the water at night means either another boat, unlikely at this hour, or something else. Medieval sailors had stories about ghost ships, phantom lights that lured boats to destruction, spirits of the drowned carrying lanterns to confuse the living. The light gets closer, bobbing with the waves, and your hand instinctively grips the knife at your belt, even though you have no idea what you do with it against the supernatural. It's a fishing boat, late returning. You exhale relief so profound it makes you dizzy. Just humans, tired like you, bringing in their catch under cover of darkness to avoid port fees or taxes, or for whatever reason makes sense in the medieval economy's complex negotiations. The boat slides past yours without acknowledgement, the crew focused on reaching dock. Their lantern, just a simple oil lamp, nothing supernatural, continues casting its glow, and then they're past and you're back in darkness. Loneliness is its own form of suffering. You've been surrounded by people all day, but they were crew members focused on work, not companions. Now you're truly alone, and the isolation is crushing. No one to talk to, nothing to distract you from your thoughts, which increasingly turn dark. You think about home, about the modern world with its lights and safety and the ability to call for help if needed. You think about how easily people die in this era, how cheap life is, how you could simply disappear and no one would care beyond the inconvenience of finding another unskilled laborer to exploit. The water itself becomes hypnotic, the reflections and movements creating patterns that your exhausted brain tries to interpret as meaningful. You catch yourself staring at the same patch of water for what might be minutes, completely zoned out, and have to physically shake your head to break the trance. Exhaustion does this, creates a state where you're not quite awake but not quite asleep, where reality becomes negotiable and your brain fills in gaps with invention. Something splashes in the harbor. Something big. Your imagination immediately supplies sea monsters, krakens, the drowned returning. Your rational brain suggests a seal or a large fish or debris falling from another boat. Both possibilities feel equally plausible in the dark. The splash repeats, closer to your boat now, and you grip the gunwale and peer into the black water, seeing nothing, learning nothing, just feeding your anxiety with more unknowns. A cat appears on the dock, sleek and gray, moving with the fluid certainty of an animal that owns the night. It stops, looks directly at you with eyes that reflect green in the dim light, and meows. The sound is shockingly loud in the quiet, and you nearly fall backward. The cat seems to judge you, finds you wanting, and continues its patrol. Just a harbor cat, probably half feral, living off fish scraps and rats. Medieval ports were full of them, working animals that kept the rodent population somewhat manageable. But in the moment, it felt like a visitation, something checking on you for purposes unknown. Your mind starts constructing narratives to stay engaged. You imagine elaborate backstories for the boats around you, for the other watchmen across the harbor, for the people sleeping in the buildings beyond the dock. Anything to keep your brain active, to fight the drowsiness that keeps threatening to overwhelm you. You recite things you've memorized, poems, songs, multiplication tables, whatever you can dredge up from memory to create internal stimulation when there's none external. The wind picks up as the night deepens, and with it comes new cold that cuts through your blanket like it's not even there. Your entire body is shaking now, constant tremors that you can't control. Frostbite is possible in conditions like this, especially for fingers and toes that are already damaged from the day's work. You tuck your hands under your armpits, trying to preserve heat, but your toes are just suffering in your medieval footwear that's still damp from earlier. Dawn is coming. You can sense it before you can see it, some primitive awareness that the quality of darkness is changing. The black softens to gray so gradually you can't pinpoint when the transition happens. The shadows become less absolute. The shapes of other boats start to emerge from the gloom. You've made it. You've survived the night watch, stayed awake through sheer stubborn determination and fear, kept the boat safe from threats both real and imagined. Alfric arrives as the sky continues lightening, looking surprised to see you still awake and alert. Thought you might have fallen asleep, he admits. Most first-timers do. The fact that you didn't might be your only accomplishment in this entire ordeal. You stayed awake when sleep would have been so easy, so tempting, so seemingly harmless. But sleeping on watch could cost the boat, the crew's livelihood, everything. So you stayed awake, and maybe that counts for something in the brutal calculus of medieval fishing. Other crew members arrive, stretching and yawning, preparing for another day of the same suffering you just endured. They'll fish, process the catch, negotiate with merchants, take their inadequate pay, and do it again tomorrow. This is life. This is survival. There's no weekend, no vacation, no retirement except death or disability. Just work, endless work, until your body gives out or the sea takes you or disease claims you or simple bad luck ends your story without ceremony or remembrance. You stand, your joints popping audibly, your muscles screaming their protest. Your hands are still ruined. They've scabbed over in places, but the scabs crack when you move your fingers. Your back is locked. Your shoulders are frozen. You smell like fish and sweat and desperation. Your clothes are stiff with salt and fish slime. You haven't slept. You haven't eaten properly. You've earned maybe 6 pennies total across 2 days of the hardest work you've ever done. And the boat is heading back out. The nets need casting. The fish need catching. The medieval economy needs its labor, and you're now part of that machine whether you want to be or not. The sun breaks the horizon, pale and cold, offering light but no warmth. Another day begins on the medieval fishing boat. You wouldn't last another day. You know this with absolute certainty. Your body has nothing left to give. But somehow, you find yourself moving toward the airlocks, taking your position, preparing to row back out into water that's already claimed so many lives and won't hesitate to claim yours. The water stretches endlessly before you, gray meeting gray where sea touches sky. The oar is heavy in your hands. The boat rocks gently, waiting, and you row, because that's what you do, because there's no other choice, because this is life on a medieval fishing boat, and surviving another day just means you get to attempt surviving the next one, in an endless chain of suffering that breaks most people and grinds down the rest until there's nothing left but the work and the water and the waiting for an end that comes eventually for everyone. But for now, you row. The rhythm takes over. The crew moves in unison. The boat slides away from the dock, heading back to the fishing grounds where it all begins again. The medieval world doesn't care about your comfort, your safety, or your survival. It simply is vast and indifferent and relentless as the tide. And you're part of it now, whether you like it or not. The sun climbs higher, warming your face just slightly, a small mercy in the cold morning. Your breathing matches the rhythm of the oars. Pull, release, and somewhere in that rhythm you find a strange, terrible peace. Not happiness, not satisfaction, just acceptance. This is the life. This is what it means to survive in an era before safety nets and labor laws and human rights. You endure or you don't. You adapt or you die. The harbor recedes behind you. The open water spreads ahead, full of fish and danger and another day of possibilities that are all just variations on suffering. Your hands grip the oar, destroyed hands that will grip this or again tomorrow if you survive today, and the day after that, in an endless repetition that defines medieval labor. And in this moment, rowing toward another day of nets and cold and exhaustion, you understand something profound about human history. This is what most of it looked like. Not kings and battles and grand narratives, but ordinary people doing impossibly hard work to earn just enough to do it again tomorrow. Generation after generation, pulling oars and hauling nets and hoping the sea would be merciful, knowing she wouldn't be, doing it anyway because the alternative was starvation. The medieval fishing boat moves steadily away from land, carrying its crew toward another day of survival. Your oar dips into the water, pulls, lifts, dips again. The rhythm continues. The sun continues rising. And somewhere in the eternal cycle of work and water and endurance, you've become part of something ancient and terrible and beautiful in its own harsh way. The story of humans wresting life from an indifferent world, one exhausting day at a time. Sweet dreams, friend. Rest well. The medieval world will still be here in the morning, should you ever want to visit again. Though after tonight's journey, I suspect you'll be content with your modern conveniences, your temperature-controlled rooms, your food that arrives without risk of drowning. Sleep peacefully, knowing you're safe and warm and impossibly fortunate to live in an era where survival doesn't require quite so much suffering. Until next time.